The morning sun crept slowly over the training camp, casting long shadows across the dusty field where the new recruits stood in formation. Sweat gleamed on their brows, boots scuffed the ground, and nervous laughter rippled through the line. Among them stood a young woman, quiet, steady, and seemingly invisible. Her name tag read, Mara L. Hayes. The others whispered about her scars. Faint, jagged lines ran from her left cheek down her neck and vanished beneath the collar of her uniform. Some said she'd been in an accident, others claimed it was from battle. No one really knew, but to them, she looked broken, an outlier among the fresh, untested recruits. At first glance, she didn't seem like much. Her movements were calm, measured, almost too gentle for the harshness of military life. But behind her calm eyes was a story that none of them could even begin to imagine. As the instructor barked commands, one of the recruits, tall, loud, and far too confident, snickered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hey, Hayes," he called out mockingly, "you get those scars fighting your mirror." Laughter spread through the ranks. Mara didn't flinch. She just stared straight ahead, her lips pressed into a thin line. But in that stillness, something in her eyes flickered, pain, maybe. Or memory. And in that moment, the camp fell quiet. Not because of the cruel words, but because a shadow had fallen over them. The commanding general had stepped onto the field. The man whose authority could silence storms. The recruits straightened instantly, hearts thudding in their chests. The tall recruit who'd mocked her swallowed hard, still grinning nervously, unaware of what was about to unfold. The general's boots crunched slowly on the gravel as he walked past the line. He didn't say a word at first, just studied their faces, one by one, until his gaze stopped on Mara. His eyes lingered. Something about his expression changed, softening just for a heartbeat before he turned sharply toward the loud recruit. His voice, when it came, was calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. "Do you even know," he said quietly, "who you just laughed at?" Before anyone could respond, he turned back toward Mara. And what he said next froze the entire field in stunned silence. "Stand tall, Sergeant Phoenix." The recruits' eyes widened. The name hit them like thunder. Everyone had heard the stories. Sergeant Phoenix, the combat medic who had saved dozens of soldiers during the Helmand assault 2 years ago. The one who had gone missing after running back into a burning vehicle to rescue her commander. The one they thought had died. She wasn't dead. She was standing right there among them. Speech balloon before the story continues. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the strength of the human spirit, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more real, inspiring stories like this one to life. For a long moment, no one moved. Even the wind seemed to pause. The tall recruit's smirk vanished. His face drained of color as his eyes darted toward Mara, who stood motionless, staring at the ground. The general took a deep breath, then continued. "Sergeant Phoenix," he said, his tone softer now, "report." Mara raised her chin and gave a crisp salute. "Sir, reporting is ordered." It was the same calm, unwavering voice that had once guided men through chaos, explosions, and fire. The recruits watched, stunned, as the general motioned for her to step forward. He turned to face the group. "You think scars make someone weak?" His voice boomed now. "Every scar has a story. Every mark is proof that someone survived." He gestured toward Mara. She was hit by shrapnel while pulling her team from a burning convoy. She carried one of her men for 3 miles through enemy fire after losing her radio. When they found her, she was half conscious, but she refused to leave until everyone else was safe. Silence. No one dared to speak. The general's gaze swept across them. "That's what real strength looks like. And it's not the kind you see, it's the kind that stays, even when everything else burns." Then he looked back at her and said quietly, "Welcome home, Phoenix." That night, Mara sat alone on the edge of her bunk, staring at her hands. Around her, whispers rippled through the barracks. Some recruits tried to apologize, others didn't know what to say. But she didn't need their apologies. She'd heard laughter before, cruel, nervous, or thoughtless. It didn't matter. What mattered was what she'd learned from pain. 2 years ago, she'd woken up in a military hospital surrounded by machines. Her face had been wrapped in bandages, her body covered in burns. They told her she was lucky to be alive. But for her, it didn't feel like luck. The guilt of the ones she couldn't save haunted her nights. The sound of the explosion echoed in her dreams. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. So she left the service quietly, unable to face the pity in people's eyes. But the general, her old commander, never gave up on her. He'd once told her, "The fire didn't break you, Phoenix. It just showed the world how hard it is to kill something that refuses to die." Months later, she found her way back. She joined training again, not as a hero, but as a student. To start over. To teach the next generation what courage really meant. But she had asked to do it quietly. No titles. No special treatment. She just wanted to earn her place again. Now, as she sat alone, she wondered if coming back had been the right choice. Until she heard footsteps behind her. The same recruit who had mocked her stood there, his head lowered. He didn't speak for a moment, just fidgeted awkwardly. Then, finally, he said, "I didn't know. I'm sorry." Mara looked up. Her eyes were tired, but kind. "You shouldn't apologize to me," she said softly. "You should remember this lesson when you see someone fighting their own battle. Not all wounds are visible." He nodded, ashamed, and left. But something inside him shifted that night. And he wasn't the only one. The next morning, training resumed. But the energy was different. The recruits stood straighter, moved sharper, spoke with purpose. Mara noticed it quietly, but said nothing. During obstacle drills, she guided them patiently, even the ones who had laughed before. When someone fell, she reached out her hand without hesitation. When someone stumbled, she stayed beside them until they got back up. The general watched from afar, a faint smile on his face. He had known this would happen. People didn't just need orders, they needed examples. And Sergeant Phoenix was the kind of example that could change hearts. As weeks passed, Mara's reputation spread beyond the camp. Soldiers whispered about her in the mess hall, not as a scarred survivor, but as a mentor who saw the best in others even when they couldn't see it themselves. Some recruits would later say she taught them more about life than war. But for Mara, every day was still a quiet battle. Some nights she'd wake up from nightmares, her breath catching as if she were still inside that burning convoy. Sometimes, when she looked at her reflection, she'd touch her scars and remember the pain. But then she'd also remember the faces she saved, the men who made it home because she didn't give up. And she would remind herself, "I'm still here." One afternoon, during a stormy training exercise, a live vehicle caught fire after a malfunction. The recruits froze, panic flickering in their eyes. The sight of flames brought back everything for Mara, the smell, the screams, the heat. For a split second, she froze too. But then instinct took over. Without hesitation, she ran through the rain toward the burning vehicle, shouting orders for the others to stand back. She pulled the driver out just before the engine erupted. The recruits watched, wide-eyed, as she rolled the man to safety. When it was over, she stood there drenched, her hair plastered to her face, hands trembling slightly, but alive. The same fire that had once scarred her had tested her again. And she had won. The general approached her afterward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You'll always be Phoenix," he said quietly. "You rise every time the world tries to burn you down." She looked up at him, a faint smile touching her lips. "We all can," she said. "If we remember why we started." Weeks later, during the closing ceremony, the recruits stood in perfect formation under the evening sun. The general addressed them, his voice proud and strong. "You came here to learn how to fight," he said, "but what you learned was far greater. You learned what strength really is. You learned that a true soldier doesn't just survive the fire, they walk through it, and come out stronger." He turned to Mara. "Sergeant Phoenix reminded us all what it means to rise." As the recruits saluted her, Mara felt something stir deep inside, a peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged again. Not as a legend, not as a wounded survivor, but as a woman who had rebuilt herself from ashes. Later that night, as the camp lights dimmed and the field fell quiet, she stood alone once more, watching the horizon. The scars on her face glowed faintly under the fading light, no longer marks of pain, but symbols of endurance. She took a deep breath, her heart steady, her purpose clear. The wind carried the faint echo of the recruits, voices calling her name, not Hayes, not, ma'am, but, Phoenix. And she smiled. Because she finally understood that rising from the ashes isn't about forgetting the fire, it's about remembering that you survived it.